Forever is the strangest thing. It's shorter than you think. No think. Longing is the music of our sphere. The gift of life is never more or less. It starts at any time you like and ends in just a wink. Pass me the lighter, baby.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Daily Examiner. Hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to Stakeout. Thanks for joining me wherever you're joining me from. Hey, listen, we've got a fantastic show coming up tonight. We're going to get right into it immediately. Ian Wishart is an investigative journalist, author, and publisher of Investigate magazine. He's authored books on topics ranging from politics to murder, scandals to religion to climate change. Ian doesn't agree with the general scientific community's view on climate change. And recently, he has released research regarding NIWA, National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research's historic weather events database. Now, rather than harp on about it myself, I thought it would be better to bring on the man himself, Ian Wishart. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, hey, how are you going? Hope you can hear me well.
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Perfect. All right, Ian. Well, as I mentioned, you've recently released research regarding NIWA's historic weather events database. The media began to claim that Cyclone Gabrielle was one of the worst weather events in history, and you questioned whether this was indeed the case, and you found some very interesting results, or actually a lack of, in the NIWA database. Do you mind summing up briefly what you discovered?
Yeah, what I did is I went back and had a look at in Papers Past, which is the National Newspaper Archive. And I was looking for storms that were bigger than Cyclone Bowler, and Cyclone Bowler was a 29.1 inches of mercury storm, or 982 millibars, thereabouts. And so I entered search phrases in for barometer and 28 in Papers Past, and struck some examples in the 1868 Great Storm. So, but there were tens of thousands of weather entries in papers past, as you'd expect, and it would have taken a lifetime to go through them all just as one person. So I reduced the search window to 1868 to 1890 to make it manageable, and proceeded to just go through all the storms that were listed that measured where a barometer measurement had been taken, and look at how big these storms were. And in a nutshell, I found that in the 22 years that I was studying, there were 24 cyclones or big storms equal to or bigger than Cyclone Bowler that hit New Zealand in 22 years. So that's an average of more than one per year.
Wow.
Now, to put it in perspective, NIWA published some research a couple of weeks ago where they found 3 storms, which is Cyclone Gabrielle in 1968, Bowler in 1988, and Cyclone Gabrielle that came in bigger than Bowler. And that was at 3 in the last 60 years. So it's a big discrepancy between the frequency and the size of the storms we're seeing now and the storm frequency and the intensity that our forebears, our ancestors, saw in the 1860s through to the 1890s. So this was staggering to read because back in that time period, we had low carbon. It was 285 parts per million, not 413 as it is now. And the temperatures were about a degree colder than they are now on average. If you factor in the global warming calculations that are claimed to exist. So we had a colder climate and we had 20 times more storms than we've had since then. And many of them big. And what was significant as well is that in the study I found 5 or 6 storms that were significantly bigger than Gabrielle that hit within that 22-year period. So bearing in mind that Gabrielle has been classed as a 1 in 250-year event by climate scientists, and it was those sort of storms hitting once every 4 years on average back in the 1860s through the 1890s. That raises big questions about what we've been told about our climate past, just how extreme weather actually was back in a colder past, and the implications for our climate future if we go back to a lower carbon, cold past, because clearly we don't want to be hit with that sort of intense damage every year as our ancestors were getting.
Wow, that's incredible. So the gist of it is that most of New Zealand's biggest historic storms and cyclones are actually missing from NIWA's historic weather database. And go ahead.
Yeah, in that period, definitely. Of the 24 storms that we found that were that size or larger, only 4 were entered into the NIWA database.
Right.
So 20 were missing. It's 83% miss rate.
So 83% missing. That's incredible. And you, I suspect that you chose 1868 to 1890. Was that just a random selection, or was that intentional?
It was random. I didn't know what I was going to find, but I knew that when I punched in the initial search term and found 1868, the Great Storm, it was as good a place as any to start. So, and because there were more newspaper titles coming on in the 1860s and onwards, there were more articles to choose from. So 1868 to 1890 was a manageable time frame to look at, but I had no idea how the story was going to end.
Right.
That was a key point. So in that sense, it was absolutely random.
Right. So in your opinion, is it reasonable then to extrapolate that data out beyond 1890 to current times?
Well, it's interesting. The number of storms that we were having that were sizable continued to be much bigger into the 1900s. As an example, the 1936 storm that struck New Zealand was a monster. It was possibly our biggest ever recorded storm, and it's huge, and it is in the NIWA database. And from the 1900s onwards, there's more coverage of these events in the NIWA Historic Weather Events database. So the criticism that I make about these things being missing from there at that point it reduces that criticism, because by the 1900s they're starting to get their act together a bit and get some of these storms in. But certainly the frequency of the storms and the size of the storms that we were having back 100 years ago in the 1920s and 30s was still much bigger than we're getting now. And so something's happened, from what I can see, post-World War II, where the frequency of big storms has reduced quite a bit. And we've actually been living a pretty quiet period since the 1960s. We've been lucky.
Right.
And even the storms that we're getting now are not a patch on the storms that we had 150 years ago. They're just nothing near it in terms of size.
Right. What's your thinking behind this? Why has this happened? I mean, is it intentional by NIWA and the government, or is it simply just laziness on their part or bad research? Why are these missing, and why are they trying to play up Cyclone Gabrielle as opposed to historic storms in the past?
It suits the narrative to beat the crap out of modern storms and claim that each one is proof of climate change and getting more extreme and more intense. And to be fair, they've had a decent summer that they can do that with. We've had some big storms across the country, floods in Auckland, that sort of thing, and some downpours that have cancelled concerts and the like. So there are some cyclonic events that they can point to and say, gee, look at this, isn't it unusual? But it's not actually as unusual as they claim. And the issue of motive and why they're doing it. NIWA was set up in 1991. And if you're researching climate change as a government agency, one would expect that the first thing that you would do is go back into our climate history and research everything you can about our past climate that we have on record, because that gives you a baseline from which then to watch the future and see whether things are changing, whether storms are getting more intense, whether they're getting more frequent, how are they striking us, are they carrying more rainfall, are they getting higher winds. If you have the historical weather events well and truly studied, then it's much easier to say to the public, look, we can see that we had very few bad storms 150 years ago, but now we've got 10 times as many storms in the modern era, and that's proof of climate change. But they didn't do that research. Now, maybe they knew the answer in advance, and maybe that's why they never bothered to do it, or maybe they're just lazy. Possibly it came down to just the dollar. There's probably no money in it for them to go ahead and do all this old past climate research when it's far sexier to jump on a jet, an American Starlifter or whatever it is that goes down to Antarctica and research ice cores in the summer and feed the penguins. And so you get NIWA doing a lot of what I'd call sexy climate research,
Right.
Lots of travel, lots of perks. But the hard yards in New Zealand haven't been done. And so along comes an oink like me with just research skills and a computer. And I dig up the past that they don't want people to know about. And
Right.
It's been a hell of a 2 weeks.
No, that's fantastic, Ian. We've seen recently huge backlash from both sides of the political landscape, and even her own party, when National MP Maureen Pugh questioned the validity of the accepted climate change theory and Cyclone Gabrielle's assumed link to it. Why is the government so desperate to push, as you've called it, the climate of fear surrounding climate change?
It's a good question. The answer is a simple one. Climate change is, for whatever science there is behind it, it is mainly a political narrative. And it is a narrative that allows for a massive change in society to be enforced, massive regulation of not just New Zealand's economy, but the world's economy. And in fact, as I pointed out in Aircon a decade ago, it is the blueprint mechanism for imposing a global governance structure, because to achieve the global goals, there has to be global coordination. And so all of these things are factors, and the left wing, if you like, progressives, if you like, have long nurtured fantasies of one unifying government for the planet, because they think it's a more efficient and better way of top-down management of all the issues, from migration to famine to or climate, obviously,
Right.
everything. So there's a political motivation behind the climate change lark. Now, it doesn't take away the fact that the climate is changing. It has been changing from the year dot, and certainly it's changed a lot since the 1850s, and we can be thankful for that because we're not getting hammered by the storms we used to get hammered by.
Yeah. Is climate change something that leading on from this, is it something that we need to be genuinely concerned about, or is it a completely false narrative, or is there truth on both sides of the argument?
I think that there's truth on both sides of the argument. I think there's no doubt, and I said this when I was writing Econ, that the world had been in the little ice age for 300 or 400 years up until about 1850, where temperatures were exceedingly cold. And the planet started coming out of that about 1850 and started warming up. And this was 50, 60 years before the first combustion engines were invented. So there wasn't any SUVs floating around to drive the warming. This was natural planetary warming. And to get that, the understanding, the physics of it, when the planet warms up, the oceans warm up. The oceans store a lot of CO2 in them. And when they warm, the CO2 releases into the atmosphere. So it creates a cycle, if you like, where the planet starts to warm, the oceans start to warm, they release CO2 gas, and the greenhouse gases do warm the planet. The question that's up for debate is how much they're going to warm the planet by, and how much of that is trying to be argued at the moment, human caused, and how much is natural. And there is, I don't think there's a lot of reasonable debate about the physics of it. You know, CO2 is a greenhouse gas.
Right.
But the issue of the use of this mechanism to control the planet is a very different one. And if you're going to do that, there needs to be some serious analysis of, well, are humans directly affecting the planet in this way? Will emissions reductions achieve anything? Or are we better off to adapt and just, build better and build smarter? I mean, one of the things that came out of my studies is that, and if you go and read the Climate Affair report, if you Google it and find it, the reality is that our ancestors were fighting climate change issues back then and complaining about climate change and how every year they were being flooded out of their homes.
Right.
And they were learning they couldn't build in certain areas, and half of Greymouth was washed away in one storm.
Wow.
Literally washed out to sea. And so they dealt with these things on a regular basis, far more frequently than we are. But it seems that the lessons that they urge people to learn never got learnt. And down the line, their grandchildren, great grandchildren have forgotten those things. And we've bought up land in areas that's vulnerable, and we've built there and we put roads across them, and we're wondering why things are going bad now.
Right. So you've obviously had some discourse on Twitter, some interaction between you and NIWA. One of our commenters has asked, why are they trying to discredit you? What have you found in your discourse with NIWA? Have they tried to discredit you, or what have they done in response to your investigation?
They have not attacked the data. They did try very early on, before I published Climate Affair, when I flew a couple of examples up the flagpole on Twitter and said, how about these storms that show that they're bigger than Gabrielle? And they did issue a statement on Twitter responding to that saying, no, we still think we're right, but we're going to go back and check.
Right.
And there's been nothing further heard from them. And in the last 2 weeks, they haven't issued any statement attacking the barometer readings or anything else that I've discovered. So I didn't expect them to be able to unseat those, because one of the things I did in the report was I wasn't just taking a barometer reading that some Mavis Gruntfuttock of Beach Haven had dreamt up and seen on her barometer hanging on the wall.
Right.
These were readings taken from ships and from port facilities in most cases, and those marine barometers were, one, extremely accurate, and two, they were necessary for the lives of the crew. If they got their barometer readings wrong and a storm crept up on a ship, the ship sank.
Right.
So they made extreme care to make sure that their barometer was calibrated properly and the data was accurate. And so when I went through the climate affair study, picking up all these past storms, I didn't just find one barometer reading from, say, Auckland. I then looked at how widespread the storm was across New Zealand and found other barometer readings that showed the pattern, the storm, where it was tracking, where its low was at any given moment in time. And you're able to see that there was corroboration all the way through of these major events, much bigger than Gabrielle.
Right.
So that's a key point. NIWA has not been able to attack the data. They try and attack my conclusions, but it's a half-hearted effort. They don't really have an answer for it. As other climate scientists have been in touch with me in the last few days, the truth is that NIWA has not done much work at all on New Zealand's past climate.
Right.
And that's the elephant in the room. We haven't done the work to work out what our baseline actually was. Therefore, 99% of the modern claims that you hear about were since records began are a crock, because they just don't have the records.
Right. So as a result of this, have you heard any rumblings or any idea of any change happening at NIWA? What do you think needs to happen at NIWA? Do they need to clean house? Do they need an investigation? What needs to happen there?
At the moment, everyone is manning the fortresses, and they're just holding firm against the tsunami of public opinion that's whipping up, in the hope that it'll die away and people will forget and move on. And if they keep repeating the mythology often enough, that people will get back to believing it. And they're looking for support from a study coming out this Thursday to say that as well. But the reality is that the Climate Affair report can be downloaded by anyone listening to the show.
Right.
It's in a PDF form, and you can email it to your local high school or primary school teachers and head principals and so forth, because this is the people versus the state in one aspect.
Right.
And it does require people to use the tools at their disposal, which in this case are hard facts, and simply email them to people and say, read it, and then come away and tell me what you think. The government wants to teach more climate change stuff in schools. The curriculum is being altered to include more of it. This is a perfect opportunity to teach the controversy, because the reality is our past is a very stormy, very unfriendly past, and we wouldn't want to go back there.
Right. Whereabouts can people find that PDF in?
If they Google Ian Wishart and Climate Affair, there are numerous sites all over the place that have picked up the report and are hosting it on their site. It's also at investigatemagazine.co.nz, and you can enter it in the search bar, Climate Affair or Cyclone Gabrielle, and you'll come across it soon enough. The Investigate site, by the way, before anyone gets excited about it, has been subsumed for the last few years into our outdoor phone store website. It's a division of that now.
Right.
So that'll be the main icon that you see when you clock into it, but you can just use the search bar and it'll pick up the articles anyway.
Great. Hey, Ian, really appreciate you coming on and your time, and obviously your thorough investigation, as always with everything Investigate. Do you have any final comments regarding this before I let you go?
No, I think, as I said, the main message I want people to understand and take comfort in is that the work that I've done is in an accessible form to anybody. And if you've got friends and family who are concerned about climate change overly so, then invite them just to read it, email it, and just say, look, I know we agree to disagree, but you might find this interesting. New Zealand had a much stormier, nastier climate in the past than it does now. And that does raise questions about what we're being told about whether everything we see now is more extreme than ever before. Because if the government and officials are not telling you the facts about our current climate, then it comes down to a matter of trust, and we all know what that means with public political relations these days. So it's about using the tools at your disposal and just having a copy in your own computer system somewhere that you can email to people. It's just about word of mouth, people power, and exercising your right to information.
Right. All right. Thanks very much, Ian. Hey, look, it's a privilege to have you on, and really appreciate you giving up your time on this Sunday night to come and talk to us. Do go check out Ian's website, obviously, investigatemagazine.co.nz. Do check out his books, especially Aircon, as he mentioned, regarding climate change. Always very well researched, and always appreciate reading your stuff. Ian, thank you very much.
All good. Take care.
Cheers, Ian. Have a good night. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. That was Ian Wishart from Investigate magazine. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Real pleasure to have Ian on. So do check out his site, as I said, investigatemagazine.co.nz. We'll just wait for this thing to disappear. Hey, I am back. Hey, everyone. All right. I've read some of Ian's books. The one that I particularly liked was his one on the Arthur Allen Thomas murder case. That was really fantastic, really well researched. Someone in the chat was asking for his link. I'll just post it up in the comments there. You can see that it's Investigate. Let me type this out without making spelling mistakes. Investigatemagazine.co.nz. You can see all Ian's stuff there. We also have the article, the original article that he published. We've republished it on the Daily Examiner with permission. So do go check that out so you can go in depth. It's a very long article, and it just basically proves all these storms that he was talking about from 1868 to 1890. It's all there, all written down, so you can share that with your friends and family. Anyway, that was I was honestly really cool to have Ian Wishart on. I've always been a fan of him for a long time, so it's fantastic. Let's move on to the census. Last week, everyone had to fill out the 2023 census. Oh, gosh. Alrighty. The census included a whole raft of new questions that hadn't been included before, including ridiculous ones about gender and sex, which are ideological questions based on an individual's feelings rather than scientific, factual, and statistically relevant questions, which is what a census is supposed to cover, stats. We're not going to get into the gender and sex debate tonight, but we are going to get into another part of it, which I was actually quite concerned about, and that was the medical information that they were asking for. They asked a range of personally intrusive questions regarding each individual, particularly surrounding disability and mental health issues. Now, I understand, of course, that the government was probably wanting to collect this data in order to understand how to better address disability and mental health issues in New Zealand. I don't have a problem with that. The question that I do have, though, can we trust the government to keep this confidential information confidential? Or are we risking a data breach of colossal proportions that will, in fact, put New Zealand's most vulnerable population at massive risk? Now, it's been made very clear over the past few years that, in fact, your personal information is not safe with the government. Over the past few years, we've seen, for instance, breaches of the database of licensed firearms owners. Now, that should be one of the most secure databases in the country, but it was breached most notably during the gun buyback. And so information of licensed gun owners was actually hacked and made available. Probably wasn't publicly made available, but it was out there so that the hackers were able to see information on where gun owners lived, what guns they had. And that's scary, first of all. Not only that, do you remember when Chris Hipkins, who's now our Prime Minister, was the Minister for COVID response, released personal information about Charlotte Bellis, the New Zealand journalist in Afghanistan, from the COVID podium on live national television? Disgraceful. And Kiwis are supposed to trust the government with personal information about their disabilities. If this data was breached regarding mental health and disabilities, it would have massive consequences. Think about this, for instance. If this data was breached, thieves would have home addresses, because the census includes your home address, your name, everything, all your information, of deaf or blind people, people who couldn't fight back or move quick enough to stop a burglary or call the police. And it gets worse, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it could. Pedophiles would have access to information of vulnerable children. So I don't know. Chuck in the comments your thoughts on the census information. Is it secure? Should we be trusting government databases with this private information, or is it risking I'm not saying it will happen, but with the current government track record on personal information, I'm deeply concerned about even the smallest risk of it happening. And the risk is probably less than 1%, but 1% is not good enough, especially based on their track record. It would have colossal impact if this information was hacked or breached. Deb says, could never trust this government with anything, let alone personal data. Yeah, I tend to agree. So it'll be interesting to see going forward with other censuses in the future. What are they going to ask? Yeah, what did Tina say here? I have never filled one out. I'm 60 this year, and I've never heard of being fined. Happy 60th, Tina. I will not enter into contract with any corporation's fake paper. Okay. Obviously, I'm not going to advocate for not filling out the census. It is a legal requirement. But it is completely. I'm going to leave that decision up to you. But yeah, if you haven't been fined, well, that's really good. There is theoretically a $2,000 fine if you give false or incomplete information on the census, but I don't actually have any cases that I know of it actually happening. Linda says, I thought it was supposed to be anonymous. Giving address and phone numbers and emails is not anonymous. Yes, you're absolutely right. That is not anonymous. The census should be anonymous, but names, address, phone number, everything is there. So that's what concerns me most. I would not be concerned at all if they did take an anonymous sample, anonymous data about the disabilities, because obviously we want to be able to look after people with disabilities and mental health issues in this country. That's very important. But the fact that is directly linked to the person filling it out with the name and address, that's what deeply, deeply concerns me. Yes, Rochelle said the DHB Waikato data breach in 2021. Yeah, there's multiple cases of data, personal data being breached and being lost by the government. So that is what concerns me, obviously. I don't think anyone else has anything to say about that at the moment. So let's talk a little bit about politics. New taxpayer union poll out this year. I'm just going to pop the data up there with the... Oh, that's still showing. Okay, so as you can see down the bottom, the results, National Labour both up, some of the smaller parties down. New Conservative rose up to 2.5%, which is interesting because that's quite a big jump for them. They've been sort of hovering around the 1.5% mark since the last election. It's an encouraging sign for the Conservative population, but it's still nowhere near enough to cross that 5% threshold to get into Parliament. New Conservative, Democracy New Zealand, Freedoms New Zealand, One Party. These are all minor parties which are sort of floating around that, I think, zero. You can see it in the ticker down the bottom, 0.5 to 2.5% mark on the polls. But none of those are enough to get across the line. I personally think that they need to join forces to create a viable Conservative/Freedoms option with a real shot of getting over 5% at the election. Now, each of these parties has their strong points and also some serious weaknesses which need to be resolved. For example, New Conservative has solid balanced policies, which I really like, and I'm going to, full disclosure here, at the 2020 election, I was a member of the New Conservative Party, and I campaigned for them. Actually, that's how the Daily Examiner started, because I was campaigning for New Conservative with the legend Elliot Ikile and a few others who were running for New Conservative, but I am no longer a member of New Conservative, so I am trying to speak unbiasedly, but that's full disclosure there. Matt King for Democracy NZ has experience in Parliament. That's his strong point. He has a solid background in the police and the farming community. We've got One Party, which appeals to the Christian population, and Freedoms New Zealand, which is the merger between the Freedom and Rights Coalition and the New Nation Party. I believe New Nation or New National. One of the two, I'm not exactly sure what their name is, but they've merged and they've formed Freedoms New Zealand. And I think they tried to get a few others on board, but that didn't happen as far as I am aware. But they have a large cross-societal reach. Yeah, so that's what Christine has said. The wasted votes for those small parties will be divided by and will be divided by the percentage the winning parties will gain. Yeah, that's right. So the narrative always around coming from these minor parties at elections is saying, well, there's no such thing as a wasted vote because you've got to vote according to conscience. But the truth is there is a wasted vote, and it's split between the parties who get in. So you are voting for parties that you don't want. Unless a party gets across 5%, all that vote is wasted. Hard facts. I know it's not nice to talk about, but the vote is wasted. And the small parties need to get on board with that and realize that people voting for them and they're not getting in parliament, they are wasted votes. Now, I do think that all the people who say, if I didn't vote for them because it's a wasted vote, if they all voted for one party, not the one party, but one singular party, I think that we would easily get a conservative / freedoms group / party into parliament, which is why I think that these parties need to unite. Now, obviously, because all these parties have some weak points as well, I'm going to be straight up and honest here about these, and I'm more than happy for these parties to come on and debate me. I'm not a very good debater, but they can come and talk to me, tell me why I'm wrong at least, because we're obviously open to discourse and open to all opinions. New Conservative has terrible leadership and marketing. Let's just put that out there. The current leadership of New Conservative, while they have good policies, none of those people would make good MPs. They're terrible communicators, and the branding on the site, it has gotten better. I will say the branding on the site has gotten better. I'm a web developer. I do a bit of graphic design, so I think I can talk a little bit about that. The branding was just not great with the change of leadership. When I resigned from the New Conservative Party, I sent in an email saying I can't support a party that because they've obviously got co-leaders, and I, in my opinion, thought that it was these two leaders just using the New Conservative platform for their own personal gain, for their own ideas. And that was the reasoning that I sent in when I resigned from the New Conservative Party. I said I can't support a party that was just pushing two leaders' separate opinions. The funny thing was, so they'd put up a post, I think it was Helen Halton, the leader of New Conservative, had put up a post regarding the Freedom and Rights Coalition, which was very controversial. But Ted Johnston, the other co-leader of the New Conservative Party, had a different opinion in that, but they'd been posting, it was over a year ago, so I can't remember exactly what happened. But basically, that was one of the things I quoted when I said I resigned. And then immediately, within an hour, both of them were on the line to me. And I asked Helen, I think it was Helen who rang me first. I believe it was. One of them rang me first anyway, doesn't matter. And I asked her about that, and she told me about it. How no, we have a unified opinion on our policies and what I posted. And then Ted rang me, Ted Johnson, the other leader. And I asked him about it, and he goes, oh no, that was Helen's opinion, nothing to do with me. So that was exactly my point. There's no unity even within these parties, within the co-leadership. So while I say I really appreciate the policies, most of the policies of the New Conservative Party, I can't support them because obviously the leadership is going nowhere, and you're not going to get into Parliament. You're not going to win any elections when the leadership can't even make up their own minds. And yeah, their branding's got to get better. It has gotten better, but it needs to get a lot better. That's just my personal opinion anyway. There's not an attack on anyone. And as I say, I'd more than welcome either of the leaders or any of the leadership of New Conservative or any party to come on and have a chat and give me their view. Democracy NZ, they do have some strong points that I mentioned before, but they're relying on Matt King winning Northland. Now, yeah, he's won Northland before, but he won it under National. And that's what Lynn has said here. Matt King from Democracy NZ is working hard to win the Northland seat back again. He had it when National. If he can garner a good percentage of New Zealanders' party vote, it could potentially get some of his candidates in as list MPs. Matt King has a good chance. I don't think Matt has a good chance. I'm sorry. That's my opinion. He might. But he lost the election last year as a National MP. It was 2017 that he got in under National. Unfortunately, I think all that's going to happen is that Matt will get some he will get a decent percentage of the vote, but it's going to just split the national vote, and you end up getting the Labour MP in for so that's where the issue is. I think I don't personally think that running on his own platform, Matt, has the ability to get in as the Northland MP. And that's what they're relying on. And again, no malice towards Matt. Matt is a great guy. We've had him on the show several times. I really like what he stands for. I like his policies as well. I like his experience. One Party and Freedoms New Zealand, they're just too conspiracy theorist based. And they might have some valid points. They might have some valid points, but you cannot run and win an election based on conspiracy theories. You need to be putting forward rational policy. And if you are going to put forward something that's controversial, you need to have solid evidence to back it up, or just ignore it. You cannot be running on conspiracy theories. That's my issue with, obviously, One Party and Freedoms New Zealand. They do have their strong points. Also, the New National Party, which is one of the merger parties in Freedoms New Zealand, they also have terrible leadership. I'll just be straight. So New Nation Party, or the New National Party, was formed a couple of years ago with the intention of not actually becoming a party. But they were planning to get a large enough lobby group to join the National Party, the current existing National Party, and get a large enough lobby group of like-minded people to overthrow the leadership of the National Party, was the gist of it, I think. The leader of the party, Michael Jacob, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. He was running that. I spoke to him on Facebook and over Messenger a couple of times, and all I asked him was for his plan. What was his action plan to actually make that happen? Because he was talking about overthrowing the leadership of the National Party, but he didn't actually have a plan in place. And Michael's probably a good dude. I don't know Michael personally, but that was my issue with it. And then when I questioned that in the New Nation Party group, I was blocked from the Facebook group. So yeah, questions around the leadership there. So like I say, I pointed out the strengths and weaknesses that I see in each of these parties. And I believe that if they all joined forces, right, then they could obviously help to balance each other's strengths and weaknesses out. And then everyone would have a voice, which would be fantastic. When I said New Conservative has terrible leadership and marketing, I think the New Conservative policy is great, but their leaders wouldn't make good MPs, personally, or a good leader. But whereas Matt King from Democracy New Zealand, he would make a good leader, for instance. So you could merge those two. Obviously, you'd have to put egos aside, and too many egos to get over, Andrew. You're right. You'd have to put egos aside and unite around a leader who has a genuine chance of winning, who can actually be a little bit charismatic, because unfortunately, identity politics is not great, but that's what we have now. It would be great if people would vote based solely on policy, but that just doesn't happen anymore. So we do need a charismatic leader who will be pushing policy primarily, but who will be a solid person as well, and hopefully help to move us away from identity politics. Whereas, so New Conservatives' weakness is also marketing, but look at the Freedom and Rights Coalition, Freedoms NZ and Democracy NZ, they have great marketing, so they'll be able to help out there. One Party, while they do have a lot going for them, they're also quite small, but they will pull a Christian base together, so that's, again, would work out if you can pull some Christian voter base in to that. Barbara McKenzie, lost me at One Party and Freedom Party are too conspiracy theory based. Fair enough. That's my opinion. Like I say, they may have raised some valid points on certain things, but I think a lot of it was at least viewed, or the way they presented it was presented very fringe or very conspiracy theorist type, which just doesn't speak to credibility. So even if they were correct, I think it needs to be presented better. Barbara, but thank you for your comment. Appreciate that, as always. The only way forward is for these parties to make concessions on their fringe policies and unite around a good, solid leader who can properly represent everyone in the coalition. A couple of other things to discuss tonight. David Ferrier has obviously gone on the attack against churches again. He's attacked Life Church in Auckland this time and City Impact Church. His article was quite long, threw a lot of accusations. Some of them were a little bit valid, but the problem is David Ferrier is living in San Francisco, attacking these churches in New Zealand. I would love... Now, I say this from a somewhat biased perspective because I'm heavily involved in church. I say church in general. When I speak of the church, the wider church, I'm heavily involved in church. And I think that if David Ferrier actually took the time to maybe attend a service or chat to one of the pastors in person, he would find out some very different stories about some disgruntled, rather than what he's hearing from some disgruntled people who've left the church. Yeah, he's had a go at Peter Mortlock, and the media has had a go at Peter Mortlock, not just him, for his mention. Peter Mortlock, the pastor of City Impact Church, is what I'm talking about. He made his money off real estate before he became a pastor. So that's not even in the question. I don't know why they're attacking him on that. The big thing that David Ferrier started on earlier last year was a Rise Church in Wellington and accused them of mistreating their interns. I don't really have much to do with the Rise Church, so I can't speak for what goes on there. But all I can say is this. There was a lot of complaints going around about interns working hard hours for their study, having to pay for their courses, and living on a little bit of money. Have you been to uni? Anyone who goes to, and by the way, so Arise Church offers, and many other churches offer a tertiary qualification in church leadership and theology, and they obviously have to pay for that course because it's a university level course. It's education. You pay for education. Any course in uni you pay for, and you probably genuinely pay a lot more than you pay for a theological course at a church college. So the idea that they were paying to be interns at the church, complete fake news. No one is making people pay to volunteer at a church. What they're paying for, right, is the study. You got to pay the lecturers. You got to pay the people who write the content. That's how a university works. Yeah, of course they were under pressure. Anyone who goes to university is under pressure and has to work hard. That's just how it works. Students anywhere, not just in churches, and church colleges are short of money, because that's what studying is. You're not working, you're studying, but it pays off later. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out with Life Church and City Impact. I'm looking forward to reading their statements on it. Yeah, that's pretty much it from me today. It was really fantastic to have Ian Wishart on. Really, really good. I've admired him, like I say, for a long time, and always appreciate his... oh gosh, I left these up. Still getting used to this thing. Anyway, yeah, always appreciate his research. He's a very solid investigator, works very hard at what he does, always well researched his facts. Do go check out his books, check out his website, investigatemagazine.co.nz. Really appreciate him coming on and having a chat to us tonight. Hey, hope you guys have had a great weekend. We will be back next weekend at 8 p.m. I'll either be really happy or really sad because I'll be going to the Blues Crusaders game at Eden Park on Saturday night. So yeah, either way, show will still go ahead regardless. Topics for next week's discussion. If you do have thoughts, tweet at the Dave Robson or at Daily Examiner using the hashtag Stakeout. If there's things that you want to talk about, things that you want to discuss, but we look forward to chatting to you. Do stay in touch. Thanks, Danielle. I really enjoyed the show as well. Enjoyed being here. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Stay safe. Do keep in touch with us through our page, The Daily Examiner, on Facebook, on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. If you want to get in touch, I'm always active on there, so you can have a chat to me there. My handle is at the Dave Robson. I'll just pull that up once I get rid of this. That's my handle there if you do want to get in touch and chat about anything. Yeah, but have a fantastic week, everyone. God bless and stay safe. Cheers.